About 5:55 a.m. on Sunday morning, Shreveport police received the first call regarding a disturbance at a residence in the 300 block of West 79th Street. The caller stated that they were on top of a house. The suspect was inside and that a male had been shot. 3 minutes later at 5:58, dispatch received an additional call indicating the suspect was a relative of the caller. A minute later, 5:59 a.m., dispatch was advised that approximately 9 individuals resided at the location. The caller further stated that the suspect, identified as Shamar Elkins, had shot everyone inside the home.
All I can tell you today is my heart is saddened. It has brought me to my knees, and of course that's a great place to be, because then we can communicate with God.
We've more than doubled our homicides in the city of Shreveport because of one act of domestic violence.
A child climbed onto a roof to survive. Made it out a window, got up high. Thought maybe up high meant safe. It didn't. That child was shot on that rooftop and stayed there alone, in the dark until the sun came up and officers finally found the body. That child was one of 8 killed that morning in Shreveport, Louisiana. The youngest of the 8 was 3 years old, a toddler. Still at the age where bedtime means stuffed animals and someone checking under the bed for monsters. And the man who took all of their lives? He had posted pictures of those same children just weeks earlier, smiling, calling them his whole world. Before we go any further, if you are new to this channel, subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell. Red Rage Crime TV exists because these stories deserve more than a 90-second news hit. They deserve the full truth. Subscribe and stay with me. And to everyone who has been with us from the beginning, we want you to know we read every comment. Every single one. The ones that make us laugh, the ones that break our hearts, the ones that push us to keep going. We see you. Keep them coming. You are the reason this channel matters. Now, let's get into it. Cedar Grove is the kind of neighborhood that does not make the news until something goes catastrophically wrong. Families have been rooted on those same Shreveport blocks for decades. Houses close together. Neighbors who know each other's kids by name, know which car belongs to which family, know the sounds of a normal Saturday night well enough to recognize when something is off. A neighborhood where 8 children went to bed the night of April 18, 2026, and did not wake up. But to understand what happened that morning, you have to understand the man behind it. Because Shamar Elkins did not carry the profile of someone the community feared. He looked, by every outward measure, like a devoted father. Shamar was 31 years old, Shreveport born, Shreveport raised. From 2013 to 2020, he served in the Louisiana Army National Guard 7 years in uniform as a signal support system specialist and a fire support specialist. Never deployed overseas. He left as a private without a combat record, without any medals to his name. But in the community he lived in, that service still meant something. It meant structure, accountability. A man who had answered a call most people walked past. He was a father to 7 children who carried different last names, Elkins, Pugh, Snow, because they came from different women. There was his wife, Shaniqua Pugh, who had married him roughly 2 years before all of this. And there was his life on social media, which painted a picture of a man leaning hard into fatherhood. Easter Sunday photos with all his children dressed up, him in the middle of them grinning. Not a single sign. But here's the thing about the surface of a person. It only tells you what they want you to see. And beneath those Easter photos, the foundation of Shamar Elkins' life was fracturing in ways that at least a few people close to him had already started to notice. Go back to 2019. Shamar pulled a 9mm handgun from his waistband and fired 5 rounds at a vehicle, and at least one of those rounds ended up near Cato Magnet High School while children were outside playing. A bullet from a man who would later be described as a devoted father. landing near a schoolyard full of kids. The charge was illegal use of weapons and carrying a firearm on school property. The outcome? 18 months of probation, no prison time, no mandatory mental health evaluation. He pled guilty, shook hands with the system, and walked right back into his life. What does it say about how we handle warning signs when that is the response to a man firing near a school? And what does it say that 7 years after that day after the probation ended, after life resumed, those same hands were turned on 8 children sleeping in their beds? That is not a rhetorical question. That is the question this case demands an answer to. Now fast forward to early 2026, the marriage was in trouble. Shaniqua had filed for divorce, citing infidelity according to family members. A court date had been set Monday, April 20th, the very day after the massacre, to begin sorting out the legal end of everything they had built together. Custody, the children, the life, all of it about to be divided up by a judge. And Shamar was not holding up well. April 19th, 2026, the morning of the killings, he had called his mother Mahalia and his stepfather Marcus Jackson. He was in tears. He told them his wife was leaving him. He said he was full of dark thoughts. He said he was thinking about ending his life. His stepfather tried to talk him through it, told him that whatever he was facing, he could push through it. Shamar's response, according to Marcus Jackson, was, "Some people don't come back from their demons." That sentence, said to his own stepfather, on the morning 8 children died. He had also recently been admitted to the local VA hospital seeking help for his mental health. The people in his inner circle were aware that something was coming apart inside him. His family knew. His mother knew. The VA knew. And there was the public trail he left too. On April 9th, 10 days before the massacre, he posted a prayer on Facebook. A request to God for help guarding his mind and his emotions against the darkness that kept pressing in. That post was not buried in a private message. It was on his public wall for anyone who knew him to see. A few weeks before that, in March, he had posted a question directed at other fathers: if you could go back and have your children with a different woman but still have the same kids, would you? That is not the kind of thing a man who is at peace writes on an afternoon. And on April 17th, he took his oldest daughter out, just the two of them, a burger spot, a daddy-daughter afternoon. Posted a photo from it. A moment of warmth and closeness that, knowing what was coming, almost impossible to look at, because that little girl had no idea. And the people who saw that post scrolled past it and assumed that a man taking his daughter for a burger was a man doing fine. That is the cruelest part of this whole story. Not that nobody cared, but that none of the signs were loud enough on their own. A prayer post. A question about regret. A night at a burger spot. Each one, in isolation, looks like a normal day. Together they were a man telling everyone around him that he was losing his grip. And by the time the calendar reached April 19th, that grip was gone entirely. Saturday night, April 18th. Cedar Grove, settling in for the weekend. Inside the house on West 79th Street, 8 children were getting ready for bed. Saria Snow, 11 years old, the eldest, the one the little ones likely looked to. Caden Pugh, 10, Layla Pugh, 7, Kayla Pugh and Kata Darian Snow, both 6, Braylon Snow and Shayla Elkins, about 5. And Jayla Elkins, just 3 years old, the baby of the group, still at the age where everything is a big deal and the world is full of things to figure out. 7 of these children shared Shamar Elkins as their father. The 8th was family, a cousin. They piled in together. The lights on the block went off one by one. The street got quiet. No one on West 79th Street had any reason to believe Sunday would be anything other than Sunday. The morning of April 19th, 2026, before the sun was fully up over Shreveport. The violence did not begin on West 79th Street. According to the Shreveport Police Department's official timeline, Shamar Elkins started at Harrison Street at the home of Christina Snow, the mother of 3 of his children. He shot her multiple times. He took her children from the house and left her fighting to survive on her own floor. Then he got in a vehicle and drove Harrison Street to the 300 block of West 79th Street. A short drive at that hour, just long enough for the city to still be asleep. He entered the second house. His wife Shaniqua was there. He shot her in the face. And then, according to police, he moved through that house with a small caliber handgun and killed the children. Most of them while they were still asleep, most of them shot in the head. Police spokesperson Chris Bordelon stood at a podium the following day and described the scene in terms that have stayed with everyone who heard them. He called it a disgusting and evil scene. A man who deals with crime professionally, who has seen what violence does to human beings, and that is the phrase he reached for. One child made it to a window, climbed out onto the roof of a neighboring structure trying to get away, trying to put any distance between themselves and what was happening inside. That child was shot on that roof. The body was found there when officers arrived and daylight made it possible to search the full perimeter of the scene. A 13-year-old who was also in the house that morning managed to escape by jumping from the roof. That teenager survived with broken bones and non-life-threatening injuries physically. But what they heard inside that house and what they carry from that morning is a wound that cannot be set or splinted. At 5:55 in the morning, Shreveport police received their first call. Someone reporting they were on top of a house, that the suspect was inside, and that a man had been shot. At 5:58, a second call came in. The suspect was identified as a relative of the caller. At 5:59, a caller told dispatch that Shamar Elkins had shot everyone inside the home. At 6 a.m., she reported that she and her children had escaped from the roof and were now in the backyard. At 6:01, officers arrived on the scene. But Shamar was already gone. By 6:07, another 911 call was coming in from Harrison Street. Christina Snow, shot, reporting that her boyfriend had taken her 3 children and fled. By 6:08, she identified the suspect as Elkins. By 6:10, dispatch had connected both shootings.
About 5:55 a.m. on Sunday morning, Shreveport police received the first call regarding a disturbance at a residence in the 300 block of West 79th Street. The caller stated that they were on top of a house. The suspect was inside and that a male had been shot. 3 minutes later at 5:58, dispatch received an additional call indicating the suspect was a relative of the caller. A minute later, 5:59 a.m., dispatch was advised that approximately 9 individuals resided at the location. The caller further stated that the suspect, identified as Shamar Elkins, had shot everyone inside the home. At 6 o'clock a.m., 1 minute later, the caller advised that she and her children had fled from the roof and were now in the backyard. 6:01 a.m., officers arrived on the scene. 6:03, officers made contact with the caller at the residence. At 6:05 approximately, officers requested the Shreveport Fire Department to stage at a nearby location close to Linwood. 6:07 a.m., a second call was received regarding a shooting in the 500 block of Harrison Street. The caller stated that her boyfriend had shot her, taken her 3 children, and fled the scene. 6:08 a.m., the victim identified the suspect as Shamar Elkins. At 6:10, dispatch linked the Harrison Street shooting with the shooting on West 79th Street and that they all were related. At 6:15, officers received information that the suspect had carjacked a red Kia Sportage at West 79th, closest to Linwood. At 6:17 a.m., our traffic units out on random patrol encountered or observed that particular vehicle traveling southbound on Interstate 49. The officers advised at 6:18 that they were crossing the Red River Bridge into Bossier City. At 6:20, officers received information that the children taken from the Harrison Street residence may be inside of the fleeing vehicle. 6:23 a.m., officers advised that they were exiting near Swan Lake area. 6:25 a.m. approximately, officers located the injured victims from the Harrison Street shooting. 6:29 a.m., officers made contact with the suspect through an exchange of gunfire. At 6:30 a.m., officers confirmed contact with the suspect in the 400 block of Brompton Lane. 6:40 a.m., officers advised that the suspect vehicle was empty and no children were located inside. 6:43 a.m., officers cleared the residence of West 79th Street where multiple deceased victims were located. 7:03 a.m., Shamar Elkins was pronounced deceased at the scene on Brompton Lane. 7:14 a.m., the Shreveport Police Department contacted the Louisiana State Police Investigative Division, and they began their deployment to the Bossier City address to begin to investigate the officer-involved shooting.
From that first 911 call at 5:55 to the final pronouncement at 7:03, the entire thing was just over an hour, 68 minutes. In that window, 8 children lost their lives. 2 women were fighting for theirs, a teenager was recovering from a fall, and a city had its entire year upended. In the hours after the shooting, a Facebook post began spreading across Shreveport feeds. It came from a man named Michael Mayans, who confirmed to his followers that yes, the house shown on the news in Bossier City, the final scene of the pursuit, was his. Michael wrote that Shamar had been like a nephew to him, a young man he had helped raise after growing up without a father, someone who called him uncle. Michael said he had no warning that morning. His security cameras faded, he recognized the voice at the door and he opened it, not knowing anything about what had taken place across the river. Shamar was standing there holding his rifle. They spoke for under a minute. Then Shamar turned the weapon on himself. Michael said he caught flying glass from the aftermath. His post ended with a plea for prayers for the children. It was shared over 1,000 times before the morning was done. When officials gathered in front of cameras on April 20th, most of the statements followed the familiar language of tragedy, heartbreak, prayers, condolences, but one voice stood apart. Councilwoman Tabitha Taylor was not composed and did not pretend to be. She stepped to the microphone and told the truth about where she was emotionally. "I can't be strong for you," she said. She spoke about the mother of those children, about what the family had lost, about what the whole community had lost. She said she did not have the words to give people, and she was sorry. And then she said what many were thinking but too measured to say out loud: "This is not a freaking joke." It is not.
We're standing in this place again. There are 8 children that are deceased. I can't be strong for you. I think about the mother and what this family has lost. I think about this community and what this community has lost. And I don't have the words to give you, and I'm sorry. I don't know what people think in the crevices of their mind to want to harm another human being, let alone that of children who have their whole life ahead of them. From what I've learned about this incident is that it's domestic in nature that makes it even more horrific for all the fighting that we do as it relates to this. And maybe you can stand strong with this, but I can't without shedding tears of traumatic pain. I pain and I grieve for this family. I grieve for the lives that are lost, and I'm asking you to please utilize every resource that the sheriff has brought forth now when you know that these situations occur. We cannot be and make this a joke. This is not a freaking joke. This is real, and this is the result when someone snaps. So I'm going to ask the community, along with prayer, with every mental health consultant, counselor that is out here, this family and this community needs you. I need you. Because how do we get through this? How do we get to the next level? It is real and this is raw. And these are the tragedies when there are domestic violence or domestic disturbances in our community.
Shreveport Police Chief Wayne Smith made clear what this single incident had done to the city's statistics. Over 30% of crimes in Shreveport are domestic in nature. Over 30% of the murders. And in one morning, at one address, that number had more than doubled the city's homicide count for the entire year of 2026. Let that register. One man, one morning, more than the rest of 2026's murders combined. And now we need to talk about the bigger picture, because this story does not exist in isolation. Across the United States, according to national data, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. That is more than 10 million Americans every single year. And researchers and advocates have documented something critical about when domestic violence turns lethal. The most dangerous moment is not when the abuse is happening. It is when a victim decides to leave, when a court date is on the calendar, when the formal end of a relationship is being imposed by a judge and the person doing the abusing realizes their control is being taken away for good. Shaniqua had filled. The court date was the next morning, and Shamar, the man with a prior weapons conviction, the man who had recently been at the VA seeking help, the man who told his stepfather that some people don't come back from their demons, walked out of his house that morning carrying more than one weapon. Now ask yourself, in states that have red flag laws, legislation that allows courts to temporarily take firearms away from people who are demonstrably in crisis, this kind of situation can be interrupted. It has been interrupted. That option exists in other states. Louisiana does not have that law. Is there a conversation to be had there? Is that conversation worth having before another city has to live through a Sunday morning like Shreveport's? You tell us in the comments. Here is what comes back over and over when you sit with this story long enough. Every person close to Shamar Elkins knew in the weeks leading up to April 19th that he was not okay. His mother knew. His stepfather knew. Bozeve Hospital knew. His pain was not hidden. It was on his Facebook page, in a prayer post on April 9th, in a question about regret posted in March, in a phone call he made crying on Easter morning. He was leaving a trail, and the tragedy is not that no one noticed. Some people noticed. The tragedy is that noticing is not the same as having the tools to act, and that the gap between those two things is exactly where 8 children fell through. 8 children are gone. Soraya Snow, 11 years old, Markaden Pugh 10, Layla Pugh 7, Kayla Pugh 6, Kidarian Snow 6, Braylon Snow 5, Shayla Elkins 5, Jayla Elkins 3 years old. Say their names, because they're not statistics. They were children who had Saturday nights and bedtimes and cousins they fell asleep next to, and they deserved every single Sunday they never got. By Monday morning, the house on West 79th Street was surrounded by flowers, balloons, stuffed animals. A school bus attendant from the other side of Shreveport drove over just to leave something on the sidewalk. People who had never met those children came to stand on that block because some grief is too large to hold alone. 8 caskets, each one small enough to break every heart in the room. If you're watching this and something in your home feels off, if the anger is getting louder, the control is getting tighter, the fear is getting more real, please reach out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. Around the clock, every day. Call it. And if you are someone on the outside looking in at a friend or family member in that kind of situation, do not wait for it to get worse before you say something. The warning signs in this story were visible. They just needed someone to take them seriously. This story needs to travel, not because of what it does for this channel, but because somewhere out there is a family right now where it is not yet too late. A share from you could be the thing that puts the right information in the right hands at the right time. You will never know whose life you changed by hitting that button. Do it anyway. Before you go, 3 things for those babies. 1. If you are not subscribed to Red Rage Crime TV on YouTube, do it now. Hit the bell. We tell these stories so they do not get buried. 2. Drop a candle emoji in the comments, 1 for each of the 8. Let this comment section be a place where their names are spoken. 3. Share this video with somebody who needs to hear it. A friend, a sister, a neighbor, you know somebody, send it to them. And tell the people you love that you love them tonight. Because April 19th, 2026 proved what we never want to believe, that tomorrow is not guaranteed. Not even for 8 children in a quiet neighborhood in Shreveport, Louisiana. We'll see you in the next one.
All I can tell you today is my heart is saddened. It has brought me to my knees, and of course that's a great place to be, because then we can communicate with God.
Apparently the shooter started at one place and shot someone who he had a relationship with or was in a relationship with. Then he went to the other location where there actually, I think, were 9 children there. One of the children has survived, but 8 of them were shot and killed by the same person. He then bolted from the house, hijacked a car, and took off. The police gave chase, and they ended up in an exchange of gunfire, at which time the assailant is deceased.
Over 30% of our crimes and 30% of our murders in the city of Shreveport are domestic in relation. Now that number has gone up. We've more than doubled our homicides in the city of Shreveport because of one act of domestic violence. We as a community, black, white, Republican, Democrat, need to stand together and fight for what is right. This is nothing but pure evil. We can have 100 new police cars. We can have a brand new, beautiful, multi-million-dollar police substation right up the road. But until we stop this violence, the cycle of violence, like I've said over and over again, we're going to still be standing here, and it's only going to get worse.
Because the truth is this: domestic violence is not a private issue. It's not a family issue. It is a community issue. And when we fail to respond in a coordinated, consistent, and compassionate way, people die. This tragedy is a painful reminder that we cannot afford to work in silos. We cannot afford to wait until the next crisis. We cannot afford to treat domestic violence as an afterthought. We must ensure that every victim, every mother, every father, every child has access to safety, support, and intervention before the violence escalates. So today, I'm calling on every leader in this parish to join us in building a fully coordinated, community-wide response to domestic violence.
Well, I was born and raised in Cedar Grove, so that was the neighborhood I grew up in. So I get it, and I just want to, it don't even have to be Cedar Grove. It can be Cooper Road, Allendale, Lakeside, all communities, all neighborhoods should feel the tragic of today.
Now I'm asking you to please utilize every resource that the sheriff has brought forth now when you know that these situations occur. We cannot be and make this a joke. This is not a freaking joke. This is real. And this is the result when someone snaps. So I'm going to ask the community, along with prayer, with every mental health consultant, counselor that is out here, this family and this community needs you. I need you. Because how do we get through this? How do we get to the next level? It is real and this is raw. And these are the tragedies when there are domestic violence or domestic disturbances in our community.